Good morning and welcome. I am Julie Shore, President of Career Development Advisors, and welcome to our new show, Next Up Wednesdays. And I have Chrissy here with me, my producer. And thanks so much for joining us. I have done some prior live streams, but this is a new show and a new time, so welcome. A little bit about my background. I am, as I said, the owner of Career Development Advisors, but I've been doing human resources coaching, consulting, career coaching, all things related to talent and career development now for more than 25 years. So our services really focus on, I work with organizations as well as individuals in three main areas. One is hiring and really getting the right people in the right roles for organizations. Secondly, developing teams. We all need to work together efficiently and productively, work harder, not smarter, right? And third, I do career coaching with individuals and for organizations. And so each Wednesday, I want to give you 5 deliberate steps you can take related to career development or talent management. And Chrissy is here while we're talking to answer. She'll watch the chat. We really would love for this to be interactive. So as you have thoughts, comments, or questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and we will address them. So thank you so much for your time and being with us today.
All right.
Okay. So last week, like many of you, I actually on vacation, and it was wonderful. It was relaxing, and I think you can pull up the first slide there. This is the lake that we visited in New York, and I don't know how many of you, so just curious, when you see a picture like this, what type of feeling does that elicit for you? I know for me, we had like 7 days. Each time I'd roll out of bed and go on the deck and have some coffee, I would look at the lake and think, gosh, how peaceful, how wonderful. And it was more or less private, especially with what's going on in the world today. There were maybe the street, I don't know, 10 to 12 houses that kind of outline the lake. And so it was very peaceful. No motorboats allowed, no jet skis, none of that. Just kayaks, as you see in the picture, fishing, swimming, those kinds of things. And people had some paddle boats, stand-up paddle boards. But when you see this picture, what do you think of? Feel free to chat that. I know, like I said, for me with my coffee, it was like, wow, this is relaxing, it's peaceful, it's quiet. But what if I told you you had to actually swim across that lake? What if you knew? So let's change the perspective a little bit. Just to give you an idea, it's probably hard to tell from the picture, but it's about 300 yards, I would say, all around. What if I told you you had to swim that back and forth and within a particular time frame? My guess is your feelings of peace, calmness, quiet, you might have a different word to describe that. Again, feel free to share that with us. So that's real life. I can tell you, so we are a swimming family. I have 3 daughters and a daughter who's heading off to college and she's actually going to swim. And I swim for exercise as well. And even though we swim a mile, my daughter sometimes swims 2 miles a day, and 600 yards is certainly not a mile. It elicited this sense of like, oh my gosh, like I'd go down those little steps and I'd stare at the lake, and it was like, I knew I could do the distance because I swim 40 laps without stopping. And this was not the equivalent of 40 laps. So it was like, okay, but it definitely brought about a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiousness, a little bit of anxiety. And mind you, my husband kayaked on the side to make sure, in case one of us got tired. But anyway, so just think of this picture. It's about perspective, right? And purpose. So originally the purpose was to go to the lake, to relax, right? And just chill out. But then when you switch it into sort of a work perspective of, ooh, now I got to swim this and I got to work hard and I got to, really focus, it's different, right? It's different. So it's about perspective and purpose. And many of us, or many of you, may be in a job where perhaps you liked your job before and now something has changed about it. There's always 2 sides to a story, 2 different perspectives. And so In reality right now, it's probably no surprise that actually about 1 in 3 of us are actually engaged at work. And that comes from the Gallup organization. They do survey after survey for years and years and years. The engagement factor might have creeped up just a smidge, but not much. And so with only 1 in 3 of us being engaged, that's 30% at work. So for any of you who are employers who are listening, that's a scary number to think about. Gosh, how do we solve this engagement thing? And so career development is my passion, and it is my passion from both ends of the spectrum, because I worked in human resources for such a long time, and I still do with organizations on the recruiting and training side. I am passionate about trying to kind of be that bridge and help people be their best selves at work, but also to find jobs and careers that are really meaningful and exciting to you. Chrissy, if you could move forward to the next slide, that'd be great. So 30% of us are engaged at work, and many of us, and you can actually pop ahead to the next one, Chrissy, many of us may have really good intentions, but how many of you have felt like this picture? Perhaps, how many of us are sticky note people? I know I'm a sticky note person, and some days I swear my desk looks like that, but many of us attempt to be organized, and many of us have a long list of to-dos, or many of us have good intentions. But the fact is that life is changing super fast right now, especially with the whole pandemic that's been going on. And so we have to be adaptable and willing to change. And for some of us who can't check off our to-do list, so maybe you're in a job that was once very predictable, very comfortable, very safe, and now it's like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is coming at me, and the job has truly changed. It's not what it used to be. Or perhaps if you're an active job seeker listening, maybe you had your traditional way of things that you did. You networked, you listened to webinars, you applied to jobs. Well, that whole networking piece is different. And so whenever we have a lot coming at us, whether you're in your current job or maybe just in your job search mode, we can get overwhelmed. And then we don't take action the way we need to. And that can be frustrating, right? And then sometimes when you have so much coming at you, you get this decision fatigue where you can't even make a decision like, do I even want to apply for this job? Should I consider leaving my job? Or if you're an employer, what do I do about this employee who I can tell is not happy in their job? What do I do? It can become very frustrating. And so today I want to talk about, and every Wednesday, I want to share 5 deliberate steps you can take. And this week, I want to talk about 5 deliberate things you can do in your job search to move it forward. What are some things you can do? Because at the end of the day, again, we all own our career development. It's not incumbent upon anyone else. Gone are the days. I remember my very first full-time professional job in 1995. I did have a mentor and people who really looked out for me. But we are being asked to do a lot more with less these days. And so it becomes difficult for people and good managers and leaders to have time to mentor you. So we have to take things kind of by the horns. Chrissy, if you could pop ahead, I think 2 slides now. And let's look at, again, we're going to talk about 5 steps you can take to refocus your job search. So these are real, tangible things you can do. So if you have a pen and paper, if you're a note-taking kind of person, write it down. So the first step is reevaluate what you want. What are you looking for? So if you're currently working, are you happy in your job? Do you like it? Is it the job itself? Is it the boss? Is it the supervisor? Is it this whole virtual thing? So many of us are working virtually right now, and it can become frustrating. So maybe you said, I'm not so happy. I'll send out a resume here or there. That's fine, but at the end of the day, you really need to know what you want. And talking with a recruiter is not going to get you there. So I'd be interested to see if anyone is willing to type in how many of you are happy in your job or feel content in your job search right now. Feel free to chat that in. And so what do? So you take a step back and you need to evaluate what you want. And there's lots of ways to do this. But one really easy thing you can do is make a list of what you like and what you don't like about your current role. Is it the work environment? Is it the company culture? Is it the job tasks themselves? Or is it just you feel like, I'm just in a completely wrong career and I don't know what to do? I will tell you that if you are interviewing for a job, a recruiter, if you don't know what you want or why you applied,
they are not going to be able to help you figure that out. However, a hiring manager will be able to tell if what you're applying for isn't something you really want. So for instance, I was interviewing earlier this week for an administrative support role for a funeral home. And I interviewed a lovely candidate, great telephone presence, good communication skills. But at the end of the day, she is pursuing a degree in construction management. Okay, construction management, funeral home support. How long do we think that individual would stay in this job? Even though the average length of stay in a job is about 4.7 years, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a company doesn't want to invest in someone who's not going to stay there for a while. Yes, we're all employed at will, except for the state of Montana, but we need to have a good faith effort because organizations put a lot of time and energy and training, and you yourself, each of us, our time is very valuable. Absolutely. It doesn't matter the role, doesn't matter the company. So it's really important. I mean, you spend close to, I forget the number, I want to say it's like almost 86,000 hours a year. I'm sorry, in your lifetime at work. You spend about 2,080 hours a year at work. So it needs to be something that you're energized about and something that you want to do. So the first step, like I said, is make a list of those pros and cons of what's working, what's not, what you like, what you don't like. Take it one step further, do the same thing for your 2 prior jobs and see if you see a pattern. Any questions so far, Chrissy, that have popped up?
I have a question.
Okay, great.
So when you're making a list of the pros and cons, what are some things, do you want to mix the personal in with the professional, or should those be 2 separate lists?
So that's a really great point. So one thing I didn't mention, and I'm glad you asked, Chrissy, because I have this discussion often with my career clients, is figuring out what's important to you in terms of your values. So I often will do an exercise with folks, and we actually do a hands-on activity with cards of prioritize your top 10 personal values and your top 10 work values. And if they are not aligned, there's going to be conflict, internal conflict, and you're going to feel like, yeah, this just isn't right for me. So there is a blend of that. So more and more people want work-life flexibility, right? Flexibility is like the number one thing, and that goes 2 ways. So the organizations I work with, I coach them and say, hey guys, that flexibility goes both ways. Employees want it, so we have to learn how to figure out and do it. So the flexibility, the work-life balance, the adaptability. So yes, if that is a core value for you, you need to know that, because if you work for an organization where it's like, nope, 9 to 5, we're watching you every minute, that's not going to work for you. Not at all. So I think you absolutely have to take those things into account. So good point.
Okay, I'm writing that
down. Good point. Good point. So you have to reevaluate what you want. The next step, Chrissy, if you could go ahead for me, is something very tangible you can do, is review your resume. And for those of you maybe who haven't started one, I'm working with another client who's been with the same organization for many years, and she's like, Julie, I don't have a resume. Or I work with clients that have just had different networking moves to different organizations. They were always recruited to their next thing. They never had a resume. So, but the very first thing you want to do is review that resume, or at the very basic step, put one together. And for those of you that have one, and maybe you've been in job search mode for a while, you just don't feel like you're getting any bites, take it off the site wherever you have it posted and read through it, and have a friend read through it. Anytime I know I'm writing a blog or preparing training materials, if I've been in it a long time, it's like I have blinders. It's like I can't see it holistically. So take a step back, review your resume, and make sure, is it textable? Is it scannable? And what does that mean? You'll see on the slide I have, will it beat AI, meaning artificial intelligence? So very large organizations utilize applicant tracking systems where a human is not looking at all those resumes. It is being pulled based upon the keyword searches they are doing for the position, and a resume is getting pulled or not. And so especially if you work in like the artistic fields or marketing fields or PR fields, advertising, I know you folks tend to like to have what I call a pretty resume, and they are wonderful. People have used Canva or PowerPoint or other, Adobe programs to design their resume. Those are wonderful, but better for either emailing them as a PDF directly or to hand in person, because those will not get picked up in the scan that is being done with the keyword searches. So those would be really important to make sure that you're aware of. Kind of dust off that resume, take a second look at it. That would be important to do.
So I know this is a basic question, but what are your feelings about your resume being more than 1 page long?
Great question. I get that a lot too. So the general rule of thumb, and again, there are going to be other people who could dispute this, is for every 10 years of experience, 1 page. So at most are 2 pages, unless you're in different fields. So, and I'm not talking about federal jobs. That's a whole other ball of wax. And actually, I don't get involved with those. The other would be in higher education. Curriculum vitae often are multiple pages. So it depends, again, on the role. But generally speaking, for probably 90% of people, 1 page for every 10 years of experience, and not to exceed 2 pages. And often, again, that's what's really hard, is trying to whittle down those key accomplishments and figure out what should I include, what shouldn't I include. So your step 2 for this week is have someone look at your resume, give you another opinion. Do you have the right keywords in there? That's important to do. And really, something, especially if you're uploading your resume to different resume database sites, it's really important to do, especially I would say about once every 2 weeks at a minimum. So the third step would be to review your LinkedIn profile. Again, I'm speaking in general, but this is another great tool in the toolbox in job search mode and even in career development mode to really make sure you check in on your profile. And if you haven't done it in a while, write it on your to-dos, see if you can do it this weekend. The more robust your LinkedIn profile is, here comes this artificial intelligence again, the greater searchability you're going to have with recruiters. And I offer webinars on a whole topic. Actually, it's a 2-session series on, how do you develop and really work, on your LinkedIn profile to maximize its use for you. But I would say review your LinkedIn profile for completeness. A lot of times people get, I don't know if I want to say lazy, but kind of, and they'll just, copy and paste their resume bullets in there. And you can do that, but there are so many other fields you need to be utilizing, like the skills and the recommendations and the about section, participating in group discussions, and on and on. So those are really important. I would definitely take a look-see at that. I was actually on a webinar with someone from LinkedIn couple months ago. And the statistics are there's actually more folks utilizing LinkedIn right now than even reading, say, the Wall Street Journal. I can tell you there are other statistics like 93% of recruiters are utilizing LinkedIn. So again, it's something that can work for you even if you don't apply for a job. So it's definitely worth reviewing that LinkedIn profile, making sure you have that professional headshot, etc.
What about messaging a potential employer through LinkedIn? Is that acceptable?
You said messaging them through LinkedIn? Yes. So one of the tricks of the trades would be if you see, for example, someone has searched your LinkedIn profile and it's a recruiter, try to reach out to them and connect with them. Absolutely. So like anything else, some people are really active on LinkedIn. If you pull up, someone and they have 12 connections, chances are they're probably not super active, but absolutely, that's perfectly appropriate. And actually, you're going to get greater responses if you personalize your message rather than just connect, and sending that little generic response. So good question. Then step 4 that you can take would be to take a step back and reflect on prior interviews. So those of you that are actively in job search mode, take a step back and think about, did I have any questions that really tripped me up, and what were those? And I would jot down some notes about, what you said and what you think you should have said. And these are things that I coach with people on all the time. Interviewing's tough, especially now, because it could be a telephone interview. It could be a Zoom or a Teams meeting, or a Google Meet, video conference. I was just coaching someone yesterday and they were invited to a Zoom interview, and she was thinking, oh, I don't need to be on video. I'll just do the phone call. And I was like, you better ask them, because if they're sending you a link, they're probably presuming. Now, shame on those recruiters. To me, I always try to communicate, because I want an interview to be as comfortable of a conversation as possible, because you get someone's authentic self. I'm not out to make somebody nervous when I'm a recruiter. I really just want to get to know you and your skill set, but not all recruiters are like that. I get it. But really reflect on prior interviews. And if you're getting into job search mode, maybe you're perfectly happy, but maybe open to it, begin to think about, what are those things I've accomplished? What are the problems I can solve for an organization? That's ultimately, at the end of the day, what a company wants to know. What value do you bring, and what problems can you solve for me? And of course, now with all the video conferencing, make sure you're testing out all those logistics prior to the interview. So another to-do for you this week is think about, all right, if I've had some interviews, but I wasn't called back, what do I think, why is that? Now, those of you who are on the other end of the spectrum, where you feel like you've just sort of been stalled out, you're not getting interviews, chances are the root problem could be, I think, in step 2, your resume, and what's on there or what's not on there, or the presentation of it. So think about those interviews.
Big question. So for when you're interviewing for a position, I often hear about that question, what are some things you're not good at?
Mm-hmm.
Or what would you think are your downfalls, or those type of questions? What is the best response to that?
Yeah, very, very good. Again, this came up this week with a couple of folks as well. So yeah, not only do you want to be able to humbly and confidently sell yourself on the things you're great at, that's easy, right? But then it's like, oh my gosh. And I will tell you, as a recruiter, I ask the question, what have you been criticized for? And tell me about a time you missed a deadline. Tell me about a time you made a mistake. And so if you're the job seeker sitting there, a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, none of us are perfect. Nobody expects perfection and for you to not have made a mistake. What the interviewer is really looking for is, okay, well, what happened? What were the circumstances, and how did you resolve it? Or what did you learn from it? Or how was it corrected? One thing I don't recommend you do is, I would not raise your hand. Let's say, I'll just use this generically. Let's say a job requires really great proficiency with Excel. All kinds of jobs do: project management, event management, administrative assistance, accounting. I mean, you name it. Excel is probably the most commonly used tool in Microsoft in many, many jobs. So let's say you're interviewing for a job where it says you need to be proficient in Excel. I would not raise your hand and say, I'm not so great at Excel, especially if you have to use it about 80% of the day. So the other thing you can do is certainly cite something that was a shortcoming and how you fixed it, or how you've since, overcame that. And that is what employers like to hear. But you definitely need to be prepared with some of those answers, because we're human. We're, you probably heard the whole saying, we're human beings, we're not human doings. And so nobody expects perfection, but they expect professionalism, value, and being able to articulate. And that's usually one of the toughest things to do. So thanks for asking that, Chrissy. And then the 5th step that you can kind of take another step this week would be to really go back and revisit the market. What jobs are you going after? Do they exist? If you have been in job search mode, let's say even before the pandemic hit, and I get it's in different phases, closures, all that good stuff across the country, it varies. But if you're still using the same resume, doing the same searching, like everyone who's looking to move forward, you've got to adapt. And so I would encourage you to re-research the market in terms of, what are people paying out there? What is your value? What jobs are really needed? And that could go back to, again, step 2, where maybe you need to tweak your resume and highlight some other transferable skills you have. But don't be ashamed of your value. So in a lot of states, and this is where my HR hat comes in to be helpful when I coach people, There's a lot of career coaches out there, but a lot of them don't have the HR background. One thing as a job seeker to know is certain states, they can ask you your pay history, and some states they cannot. And some states, it depends on the point in the process. So a common question I know I ask as a recruiter is, so what pay range are you looking for? Because that is perfectly acceptable. And I know job seekers often struggle with that question. And this is where I'm saying, make it a point, if you don't know, even from, a very basic standpoint, budgetarily, what you need, that's step number one. The second step is to figure out, okay, what is your market value? And one way to do that is to look at other job postings in your area. Some of them have pay ranges on there, some of them do not. And so to be prepared and know your value. So I know I was coaching someone this week as well, where it's like, oh, I'm going to apply for this job. I have this interview, but I know they're not going to pay, what I was making. Sure, there are budgetary restrictions for different types of organizations and sizes. Absolutely. But it's up to you. It's a personal decision if you want to share, well, in my last role, I was making X. But I am negotiable based upon the total compensation and benefits package. But don't be ashamed of the skills and value you bring. Some organizations will say, hey, I know she's a little bit more than what we budgeted, but we could really use her to do A, B, and C in addition to what the core job is. So again, be practiced, be prepared, research the market, and continue to do that. Check it out this week. See what postings are out there in your field, what the pay is. And here again, I really encourage you to write that down, because the scripting of that can be tricky for some people. So really important exercise to do. And then I would do it again next month as well.
So what would be like ballpark if you're looking to get a pay raise in your next job? What is the, I guess you can say, average ask or reasonable ask? Is it a $5,000 pay raise, $10,000 pay raise? What are some of the benchmarks for that?
Really great question. So my very first job was as a compensation analyst. So I probably know a little bit more than what you'd look for in this answer. But in a nutshell, every organization has what you call a compensation philosophy. And so for example, an HR manager role in a higher education is not going to make as much as an HR manager in a professional services firm. There are just some industry budgetary limitations in terms of size, value, internal intrinsic worth as well. So I think it depends on your skills, your background, and where that value is within that organization. And so I will tell you the national, and I haven't looked at this in the last couple months, but sort of the national cost of living merit-based increases are about 3%. They've been hovering there. Some might argue and say, hey, I'm looking for about a 10% increase. It really depends on the market value of the role, where it's located, and really, again, what is that role doing? If you're just going to do the same thing, you may or may not get a little bump. In terms of thousands of dollars, what I typically see people do, I would say maybe some people make a move for 3 to 5. I mean, gone are the days where it's like, oh, here's a $20,000 increase, unless the role is substantially different. You're jumping from a management to a director to a VP type of role. But again, it all boils down to the intrinsic value and the benchmarking data, which I get is not easily accessible. But good question. Very good question. Feel free. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions at this point. Feel free to chat them in. But I did want to share with you. So again, I shared some tangible steps that you can take, whether you're actively searching, you're about to, you're thinking about it. I will also say blanketly, don't stop or don't put it off and say, oh, when this whole pandemic thing ends, then I'll do it. No, organizations are hiring now. And I would strongly encourage you to get moving and start with some of these basic steps. I wouldn't wait. but activity is happening in the market. And for those of you that might need a little assistance, perhaps you're thinking, okay, great, Julie, I want to switch careers, but I have no idea what to do outside of your pros and cons list and assessing my values. Chrissy will pull up my website. I actually have 2 upcoming complimentary webinars that you are welcome to sign up for, pass along to your friends, coming up Thursdays in August around noon Eastern Standard Time. And we'll wait for Chrissy to pull up that link here a second so you can see where to go. But I believe the first one on August 6th is switching gears. So again, getting into that career exploration process. And then the following Thursday, the 13th, is going to address really some core job search techniques you can use as you're trying to find your next job. So 5 secrets, there you go, to landing your next job. You're welcome to register for one or for both. My website is www.careerdevelopmentadvisors.net. I also offer free complimentary strategy sessions for 15 minutes. So if you've been at this job search thing for quite some time and you just can't seem to either land that next job or you can't seem to even get interviews, we should definitely talk. It could be a variety of reasons. So I'm certainly available and happy to help in any way I can. So I don't know if there's any parting thoughts, comments, or questions. Feel free to chat those in. But I'm happy to brainstorm with you. And if you have any future requests for a topic as we move forward on Wednesdays, Next Step Wednesdays, I'm certainly open to that as well. You can send me an email at jshore@careerdevelopmentadvisors.net.
Yeah, and I want to get that up for people to see here in just a second. I apologize. I had some technical difficulties, so I'll make sure that I can get that up for you. If you want to go ahead and just share that information again with people so they can jot it down.
Sure. So my website is www.careerdevelopmentadvisors.net. And then you could do a /events if you'd like to sign up for one of the upcoming webinars. Or my email is jshore@careerdevelopmentadvisors.net. So I hope you've received some takeaways, 5 key steps that you can actually take. And we could do a whole other segment on time management and how do you get everything done you need to, but schedule time in your calendar, make it a priority. Otherwise, it's just sort of a wish and it won't happen, right? So we only accomplish what we measure and we hold ourselves accountable for. So really just, even if you chip away at one of those things at that list, I hope that will be helpful to you. So I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Happy Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.